that story, or maybe you could ask around Port Alberni to some of the people who've been here for all their life and find out if there's any more details about that. That'd be pretty interesting to find out, and possibly the person that ran the damn thing over, or some of the fellas that were involved in burying it, maybe still alive and maybe willing to give it up, right? But anyway, thanks for that share, man, and whatever you got, just share it. It's never too long, all right? Just get it out, share it. Especially it's like these days, catching an email on here is almost like a lottery ticket to win, for God's sakes. There's so many of them, right? So the next time you do send something in, send it all in at one go, all right? And I will share it, and I'm not gonna bitch about it, okay? But anyway, keep asking around the hood, and you will hear where we are today. You are gonna hear so many encounters, it's going to be ridiculous. Remember my words when I mention that. It's true. What do we got? Steve, follow on to my story below. My hunting buddy checked the photos on his game cam I pulled when taking down his tree stand. He shared these photos with me, saying that big guy was watching. All right. Steve, feel free to use my name. For the past 9 months, my archery elk hunting buddy and I have watched all your videos as we are working to understand the Sabbath. The goal for me is truth. Truth regardless of the consequences that come from searching and sharing what is found. In the search, I've read Scott Carpenter's books and the Book of Enoch by Autumn Williams. All this information goes to build a general understanding of what/who the Sabbath are and their behavior. You know, on that note, I'd like to add in that I think it's possibly right now, it's possibly more worthy to try to figure out who we are to understand all this shit. I'm pretty sure that we have been lied to about who exactly we truly are, where we came from, and what we can do. So I think possibly, in order to crack open these secrets, possibly, we gotta crack open our own first, right? Possibly. Think about that one, toss it around between the ears a bit. I hate when the phone shuts off like that. Little did I know I would quickly have my own encounter. 3 weeks ago, I headed in early to our elk camp in eastern Oregon between the towns of Ukiah and La Grande on Highway 244. I was the only one in the established state campground. Set up my trailer and camped and settled in for the night. At about 2 a.m., I came awake from an insane stench in my nose. I turned and looked into the kitchen of the trailer, and a shadow moved away from the kitchen window, and the smell quickly faded. I had never smelled anything that pungent and putrid. In my head, I knew what just happened. I would have felt silly speaking out by myself, so in my head I said, I'm only here to hunt and camp. I don't mean you or your family any harm. I figured that since they can mind speak, there's a good chance they're listening to our thoughts anyway. I eventually fell back asleep and had no other issues that night. The next morning, I finished setting up camp, and prior to driving to my hunting area for the evening, I set up my game camera on a tree adjacent to my camp. Travelers on the highway drive through occasionally, and I wanted to know if anyone messed with my camp. When I returned that night and was making dinner, I remembered the camera and went to check it. It had been shoved to the other side of the tree, 90 degrees away from the camp. A few photos were present, but nobody captured. The camera was well hidden and also strapped down hard. It took an effort to move it on the tree. I went back to making dinner. When I went to throw some trash in the bin I'd set up, it was missing. I turned on my headlamp and saw the trash bag was about 20 feet away and rolled up like a sock. All the trash was still in it. The flexible can was another 20 to 25 feet away in the direct line toward a culvert that went under the highway and over to a small river and wooded hillside. I had no doubt who moved my camera now and why. That night, pine needles were tossed on my trailer windows under the awnings. I covered each one. Again, I repeated my mental statement from the night before. 2 days later, my elk hunting buddy showed up at camp and I filled him in on what was happening. We're in agreement that it was likely there was savvy in the area, and that fueled good discussion during dinner. The next morning, he went hunting out of camp to a stand on a trail near a camp. Around noon, when I was leaving to drive to my hunting area, a large RV was pulling into a camp spot next to the highway. There were 2 men and a large dog. I drove out as they were getting ready to back in. Later that night, my buddy told me that he'd been hiking back to camp at the same time. He could hear them working on backing the RV. He then said that as they were noisily doing that, he could hear the trees being thrashed behind their camp spot about 60 to 80 yards behind them. At first, I thought it must have been a bear and began stalking in. As cars would drive by, or the campers would make more noise, he would stalk in closer. He said it sounded like 2 to 3 inch limbs were being snapped from the trees and other limbs and debris being broken. Once he got to where he thought he should see what was making the noise, it all went silent. The RV noise continued, but the thrashing stopped. Unsure what to make of it, he backed out and went to camp. 2 hours later, he's made his way back to his stand. 1 hour after climbing into his stand, he was shaken to his core. Across the highway and up on the hillside opposite camp came a roar that he said sounded like King Kong. He could feel it in his chest. He said that it was so loud, he was certain I must have heard it at my hunting location about 4 miles away. He said no animal he knows could have ever made that sound or been that loud. When he was telling me the story at camp that night, I knew that the branch breaking he had heard earlier in the day must have been the big guy, who I thought likely had a hide somewhere near the RV campsite, and along with the presence of the dog was pissed that it was being interrupted. Then my buddy snuck in on him. He headed across the highway and eventually proceeded to let out his frustration in the massive roar. The next morning, my buddy decided to head home, and I asked him to leave his stand, and I'd hunted it for a few days. That afternoon, I was in his stand for about an hour when, what I would estimate must have been a 20 to 30 pound rock, was slammed into other rocks about 80 yards in the trees to my right. I only heard 2 limbs break prior to the impact, so I can't tell if it was thrown from a distance or just lifted and slammed. This time I spoke out loud and repeated my earlier statement with additional that I was hunting to feed my family too. No other sounds or activity happened while I was in the stand that night. I did leave the stand while there was still some light out. I was looking forward to walking out in the dark. That night there was at least 1 clear tree knock that I heard from the direction of the stand while I lay in bed. The throwing of pine needles continued. The next morning I went into the stand at 4 a.m. And 30 minutes after being in the stand, in the dark, it sounded like the same rock was slammed into the other rocks. I again repeated my statement out loud. Around 9 a.m., 4 elk raced around the mountain to the hillside above me. They were in a panic for something around the hill. They were in a panic from something around the hill and above camp. After 20 minutes, they settled down and came down to the spring. I filled my cow tag with the largest of them, and it died less than 20 seconds later, above where the rocks had been slammed in the trees. Uh-oh. I looked around a bit, but didn't see any rocks in the area that could have caused the sounds. I butchered the cow and bagged the meat. I moved the 2 hindquarters in front of my friend's big game camera to hopefully detour the big guy from taking them. I then strapped the rest of the meat to my pack, broke down the stand, and prepared for moving. While hiking the first load of meat out, 5 or 6 stones were tossed toward me, landing in trees 4 or 5 feet in front or behind me, and then chinking down the branches to the ground. I stopped and said, "Listen, I'm leaving. I have 2 more loads to carry out and I'm leaving." I dropped that load of meat at the camp and returned for the next. The rocks were again thrown during the second load of meat, and I repeated that I only had 1 more load and I was leaving. Nothing happened while hauling the stand out. I then packed up my camp, loaded the meat, and left. For the 9 days I was there, I never felt dread or fearful. I attribute that to my efforts to study the information provided in our videos and the books I've read to build a foundation of knowledge concerning their behavior. I also do not think the Sabi were trying to make me fearful. I only think they were curious. I also never had the feeling of being watched. Maybe I don't have that sense, or it's not developed. It's possible the initial statement that I was not there to hurt or harm them or their family, if understood/received, may have put them more at ease with me as I was with them. As it acknowledged them as a people and showed we understood and didn't mean any harm. I believe they were mad at the guys in the RV, but never at me or my buddy. A person wasn't going to be bluff charged out of my hunt, but only because I didn't feel threatened. Had I felt or experienced any direct threats, I would have left immediately. Side note that I only shared with my buddy. On the second day, in the stand between the rock being thrown and the elk being tagged, I was startled by a sound coming from the highway, about 200 yards away. To me, it sounded like a giant bird taking off. Definitely down by the road/river, but so freaking loud that it sounded like it must have had a 20-foot wingspan. The sound lasted for about 10 seconds, but it felt like minutes. At first I thought it was maybe a flock of turkeys, since it was so loud, but it was definitely only 1 set of wings and not multiple. I spun on the stand to look and didn't see anything. No other sounds, no wind, no cars, no nothing. My gut feeling is that maybe there is some portal along the river being used by more than just the Sabbath. I've hunted this area since 2003 and have never experienced what we did this year. I've sent you a few other emails regarding how some of these things may be tied to the times we're in. These experiences may fortify that possibility. If I were to pose a question to the round table, it would be this. If you accept the current theory that Sabbath are the biblical hybrid human Nephilim as I do you believe that their offspring, although having the fallen angel DNA, are fallen angels or demons? In other words, can a demon spawn a demon, hybrid or otherwise? People close to me want to lump them all into the demon category due to their DNA origins. I personally haven't come to that conclusion yet. Kind regards to you and yours, Steve. I think very highly of you for who you are, what you stand for, and what you do. God's peace. All of our game camera pictures were normal with elk, bobcat, etc., but one, which I'm including here, Brett Meyer. Okay, Brett. It's tough for me to see. Okay, well, I'm going to share these. I'll definitely share these on the video. Blow them up. Have a look at them once I get on the computer. They're kind of small on my phone, right? So, you know, as well as I do, once you blow up the photograph, especially in the woods and the sticks and the branches in the behind, without being the person, it's just hard for me to see what you're looking at. I can see something might be there for sure, but I don't know what it looks like to me, man. I can't tell. It says kind of looks like your buddy was watching you take the camera down. Head, eyes, and shoulders, no neck. All right, we'll share it online. Let everybody have a look at that. Thanks for sending that in, man. Absolutely appreciate it. Appreciate the way you're carrying yourself when it comes to this topic. Thank God you're thinking rationally, you're trying to figure it out, and you've made peace with the fact that these things are running around where you are. It takes a huge set to still hang in there, right? Especially if you're hunting and you got a kill down, and these things are tormenting the shit out of you. I don't know of too many people that wouldn't have just deserted that carcass and left. Me included, I don't know. No, I probably would have stayed. I probably would have got pissed off. And that would piss me off if somebody was trying to steal my successful harvest. That would make me angry. Yeah, it would. I probably would have stayed too. Because I'm thinking about it. Even the few grizzly bears that have stolen moose and elk off this, I got angry and stole it back. It's like, yeah, you man. Nope. Anyway, thanks for that share. Keep sharing more, alright? Keep sharing more, no matter what. Whatever you got that can help, share it, alright? Oh, better, more batteries.